Years now since a shocking crime took the lives of a Florence couple. 74-year-olds Bill and Peggy Stevenson were stabbed and bludgeoned 9 years ago. Now detectives say a podcast and a $50,000 reward are generating new leads in the case. That podcast is called Just the Tipsters, and it's hosted by a Northern Kentucky native who now lives in California. Melissa Morgan is with us this morning via Zoom. Melissa, so good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila.
So, Melissa, I listened to the show yesterday that you did with Detective Coy Cox of Boone County, and I didn't realize that so many people thought this case was solved, including you, right?
Absolutely. I just assumed if there's one murderer in a family that was the person responsible, and boy, was I wrong.
Right, because they had a nephew who was found guilty of another murder in Indiana, but the detectives in Boone County don't think he killed Bill and Peggy, right?
Well, as Detective Cox has trained me so well, I will say no one's ever eliminated, including myself. But yes, I believe he's able to be put on the back burner, and they need to focus on other suspects and persons.
Right. They didn't find any of his DNA at the crime scene. Before we get back to the case, though, I would just like to know, Melissa, how do you choose the cases to profile on your show? You've done so many.
That's such a great question. I get a lot of submissions, people asking me to cover specific cases, and it really is something that just kind of has to grab me. There are absolutely so many podcasts available, and most of them true crime. So you can have your case submitted to so many different places, and maybe my podcast isn't right for a specific case, but when I get one that I know I got to cover, you feel it in your gut.
Yeah, was there something about being from Northern Kentucky yourself that made this sort of feel close to you?
It did. Some friends that I went to high school with mentioned the case was still unsolved, and I was a little shocked. I thought for sure that had been already closed, and it really just stuck with me. And then, ironically, 6 weeks later, the day I picked up the phone to call the Boone County Sheriff's Office was the anniversary of the date of their murder.
Wow.
So I think some things happen for a reason. I think that was a reason that I needed to cover this one.
Well, one of the things that I found really fascinating in listening to your chat with Detective Cox was what happened in the Stevensons' home after they were murdered. I had not heard that before. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's another reason that this case is so fascinating is because of the odd circumstances. As Detective Cox always says, there's not a crime scene. It was a staged scene, so that the killer or killers wanted us to think it was a certain thing and may or may not have been, or something very different. It was just to confuse investigators, and I think they did a good job for a while, but I think that's coming to an end, and the confusion's going to be wrapped up, because I am overwhelmed with how amazing the Boone County Sheriff's Department is, and their unwillingness to let this case ever get cold.
Yeah, I know that they have worked this case that entire 9 years. They didn't ever stop working it and following leads. But what do you know about the leads your show has generated?
I wish I could tell you, but Detective Cox tells me nothing. So
really?
All I know is I got a call a few days before the press release came out, and that the family decided to attach the $50,000 reward. And he said, what you don't know that is going on behind the scenes is we've received some tips. Some of them have information that is unique and had never been released to the public.
Oh, wow.
So that was a pretty big day.
Yeah. Have you had a show that resulted directly in a crime being solved, Melissa?
I would love to say yes, but podcasts don't solve crimes. Law enforcement solves crimes. Mm-hmm. What we can do is shine the light on a case that may have been fallen between the cracks or may have been pushed on a back burner. That's what we can do. I will tell you, a week before I heard from Detective Cox, a case that's local to me, and one of the reasons I started the podcast, resulted in an arrest. And I wouldn't say the podcast had a direct result on that, but I can tell you I whined and cried hard enough to the LA County Sheriff's Department cold case unit, and I guess they listened.
Wow.
And it's been a great couple weeks, I can tell you that.
Huh. What made you get into this? You don't have a law enforcement background yourself, Melissa.
I do not. I think there's a lot of weird kids out there like me. I mean, I'm not a kid, but as a kid, fascinated by true crime. Way too young to have read Helter Skelter, and yet I did. And since then, I've wanted to, in my heart, get the bad guy. I just feel like there's no reason to take another person's life unless it's in self-defense. And if you do, you need to be caught.
Well, keep up the good work, Melissa. You have a new fan in me. I'm sure the detectives all appreciate it too. Yeah. And if you want to read about the Stevenson case or call in a tip to Melissa and her show, all you have to do is click on this story on local12.com. Best of luck. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you, Sheila.